So, when I think of Turner, I think of CNN, I guess.
Yes.
But then you were describing all the stuff that you guys are. Maybe you could just start by taking us through a little bit about what Turner is.
Sure. So, obviously, well, here's the way I think of Turner. It's actually a portfolio of brands across 3 verticals. So you mentioned CNN. So news is obviously a big part of that business, but also entertainment, TNT, TBS, Adult Swim, any Rick and Morty fans out there. We also have sports, right? We had the Boston Red Sox-Yankees game last night, and so and so we
That didn't turn out too well for one of them.
No. As a New Yorker, it was a little hard to watch, but so we have these 3 different verticals, like all with their own complexity, right? Any business, like their own uncertainty, right? And so, it's important, like, how do we manage those different businesses, right? Like, how can we help keep those business stakeholders informed, help, make the decisions they have to make quicker, easier, more informed.
So what is revenue analytics? Like, what
Sure.
really is your mission, and what does your team do?
Right, and so revenue analytics, we're focused solving the data problems, the business problems across our enterprise sales team. And what we're trying to solve is actually, I think I saw Daniel Mintz here earlier. We lovingly stole his maturity model and extended it for Turner. So if you've heard it before, essentially it's starting with descriptive historical statistics, right? The first thing you need to do in your organization is making sure that you know what happened last week, last month, what quarter, right? And so we're trying to solve that for the ad sales business in terms of like how well are we monetizing our inventory. Next stage is diagnostic. So it's like, all right, maybe you found a problem, right? You see that your sales dipped, your sell-through rate dropped. Why did it happen, right? Understanding what were the causes, how can you sort of address that going forward. Third step being more the here and the now, all right? So how are we doing right now? Are there any problems that we should be taking action against, right? Can we do that more quickly? Fourth being more forward-looking, predictive analytics, right? So now that we know kind of what's happened historically, what's happening now, what's coming up, how much inventory do we think we're going to have in the future, right? How can we change or modify our go-to-market planning, right? What levers do we have to help improve monetization across our portfolio of sites? And the last stage is prescriptive analytics. So given everything that we know historically and forward-looking, what actions can we take? Can we start to automate those actions? Can we improve those actions?
So take me through the evolution, because you've only been there, 2.5 years?
Yes.
I mean, that's a lot, right? I mean, take
Yeah.
me through the evolution. What was it like when you started, and how did that evolve?
Sure. When we started, there were a lot of data silos. So data was, if I can use the word, stuck, right, across different systems internally across Turner, as well as with our many vendors. And so when it came to data access, you were mentioning earlier, that was a big problem for the organization, right? It was a big problem for the analysts, right, who were tasked with getting that information to the people that needed it, right? And so to get access to the data, to get the data, you needed to have, well, first of all, you need to have access to all these systems, right? Which is a bottleneck right there, just proper authentication. Knowing how to use these systems, and it was over a dozen systems. And then being able to stitch all this data together, right? And so we had our team of really smart, really capable analysts, doing the best that they could, trying to keep up with demands, but the reality was they just didn't have the tools. And so you mentioned that line before, like that line was growing and growing, and unfortunately we did have some people going rogue, as you mentioned, which caused, chaos, in the organization. And so what we set out to do was to solve that, right? Breaking down those silos, organizing our data, simplifying the data pipeline so that analysts weren't spending their days out of their week building these reports, working on reports, so that we can get them the data sooner, and then not have them be the gatekeepers, right? Where everyone had to line up at their desks. But we partnered with them to make sure that they helped us keep that reliability, the reliability that they built, right? So there was an access problem. Their focus was keeping their reliability in the data. So it's like, okay, how do we keep that reliability going forward?
So you had I think it was like 10 or 15 of these people.
Yeah, it was probably around five. Actually, probably wasn't even 15. It was like five or 10 people that were serving the needs of an organization of several hundreds, right? And
wow. So what was morale like there? I mean,
yeah. Well, I can tell you, the morale was as you expect. Like when you have teams that are underwater in terms of requests coming in, needs coming in, like these are urgent needs. Like we talked about the businesses before with CNN. Like breaking news happens, and we need to react. And these things we need to react quickly and timely. And so the morale there was on part is like, all right, I'm underwater. How do I keep up? And the analysts are trying as hard as they could, right? And so like they feel this need of like, all right, I want to do what's right for the business, I just can't keep up. There was also this expectation, right? I think you mentioned it earlier, where they expect to have access to this data. They expect to have these tools. This is the world that they've grown up in. And so there was a bit of this frustration of like, all right, we're going to do the right thing for the business. We're going to make do with what we have. But yeah, boy, we would really like to have better tools, more access, and the right systems in place to get this done.
Right. So when I think about access, then the other side is this reliability question. Now, in revenue, right, there's usually not a lot of room for error, right? I mean, so I would guess you guys were probably pretty clamped down through these people on the reliability thing, or
yes.
What were you experiencing around reliability?
Yes. So the reliability. So we went through this change, right? So you had on the screen before the different waves, right? And the team, did a great job in terms of reliability, but there was this access problem. And so our job was to take us from like this second wave to the third wave. And what we needed to do was to design the product and the processes to keep that reliability, right, while solving the access problem. So our approach was everything that we did, right? So again, we designed this into our processes and our product. So in terms of how we engaged our stakeholders, right, making sure understanding their needs, right, what outcomes did they want, to communication. So there will be issues, so reliability isn't necessarily 100%. It's like you want to keep that as high as possible. But when there is an issue, how do you communicate that, right? Over communicating is a key part of making sure people understand what's happening, making sure there's comfort level in how it's being addressed, and setting and managing expectations is critical. And then on the development side, we wove this into the full cycle. So early on, setting standards and best practices in our look-and-meld development, data engineering, setting up gates, code review. So look-and-meld, checking that in every time, making sure we're following those standards, catching issues early before they get released, building out QC and UAT practices. So making sure that we're doing the proper QC, leveraging capabilities from Looker. The API solution's been a huge help in automating that. And from UAT, partnering with those analysts I mentioned earlier, right, to be an extra set of eyes, right, making sure we're keeping that trust in the data that they built. And so that was a key part of that mission.
So you mentioned it, in, kind of this idea of the third wave, but this shift of infrastructure and whatnot. And I know you guys have been on a journey there.
Yes.
Why don't you kind of take us through what that looked like? Because it was different before you were there, and I think there's been a lot of changes, right?
There has, yeah. So I would say we're somewhere probably in between that first and second wave when I started. And 2 years ago, we had our data in multiple places, siloed across the organization, and we had these point solutions, right? And so some of them were probably phase one, some of them were probably phase two, but we need to start bringing them together. And so when we set out to solve this in terms of getting us to that next evolution, getting us to that third wave, we looked at it partly in part of an investment strategy, right? So this sea change of databases, right? How do we focus our spend just to make sure that we're going to get the most out of that investment, right? Because it's thinking about it from Turner's perspective, the scale of the data, the amount of processing that's needed, it's a large investment. And so you want to make sure that you have a best-in-class solution, a solution that's completely aligned with your needs and your business, right? So we want to focus that spend there. And then on the BI side, like what is that best-in-class BI solution, right? And not having sort of that overlap in spend that happened previously in earlier waves, where like maybe you had your database, maybe you had an analytical database, transactional database, and then your BI tool, also a database, compute power. And so kind of looked at that as like, okay, there's duplication in spend, right? And we're not getting the most out of that investment. And so we want to make sure that we were working with partners that helped us not only solve the problems that we needed, but allow us to get the most return out of that investment.
Yeah, and like, what do you think the benefit? Like, if you look at sort of this new architecture, what do you think the big benefits of that are? Where have you guys seen those benefits?
I think the biggest benefit has become kind of two things. One, flexibility, and the other is curation. So flexibility. The old world, sorry, from my perspective, that's just 2 years ago. We need to have perfect knowledge of every dimension and metric that the business is going to need, right? We had to have that set up because it was so hard and difficult to make a change, right? And so to add that dimension, I can tell you for internal experience, like it would take months to do if you need to add that one new dimension, and it was limited because we only had so much historical data, so we never had that sort of like year over year, or that trend that you would want to have, when looking at a metric, looking at a dimension to make a decision. It just wasn't feasible. And so, with this new world of databases that we have, these massively parallelizable systems, we're able to retain more data, right? We're able to process more data, so we're able to keep more precision in the data that we have, and so that allows us to be more flexible. Right? So when it comes to designing the system, designing our data architecture, we have to make fewer trade-offs in terms of the data that we keep, and so it allows us to say, like, okay, the business wants this new dimension. We have that. We can do this. We can add it either sometimes immediately, or in as short a time as like hours or days. And so it allows us to be more flexible, allows us to respond faster to the business needs, and ultimately it has that greater impact on the business. So that's sort of the, as it relates to flexibility. And then what it does in terms of curation, it allows us to organize the data in more effective ways. And so we have many different teams. So I mentioned my primary focus is enterprise digital ad sales and solving those needs. But that's not just for the ad sales team, right? Or even within ad sales, there's many different roles. And then it's beyond ad sales, everyone cares about revenue, right? So whether you're the marketer, right? What is my return on these marketing campaigns? You're the product team. It's like, okay, how well is my product doing? You're biz ops. You need to manage the broader CNN portfolio. And so plugging into these teams, curating experiences for each of them, this new paradigm Looker allows us to curate these experiences, curate the content for these different teams. It just wasn't possible before, certainly not at scale.
Yeah. So, a lot of times I think revenue, and I think, we just need to get the report to the CFO or the report to the CEO.
Right.
But you've talked a lot about democratization. I mean, what were your goals there? What were you trying to do beyond just kind of have this be the formal reporting tool or whatever?
Sure. So, obviously there is a lot of need at that C-level suite, that executive suite, in terms of access to data and the need for data to make decisions. Totally recognize that, and then we're like, okay, we're going to take a different approach, right? So we mentioned, I guess earlier there was a lot of conversations about like this new generation of the workforce coming in place and the need for data. So we recognize that. We also recognize like who's going to spend most of their time, in a BI tool, who's going to spend most of their time working with data. And where are we going to get, again, going on to return, like where are we going to get the greatest return on this investment that we're making in BI and in data? And we have hundreds of analysts across Turner, and so to the extent that we can empower them to be more efficient, to do more, to do greater things, to do higher value work, right? It kind of like, it trickles up, right? Because that's where the data is going anyway. The data is going from the analyst up into this executive C-level suite. And we just found like it was a greater return, right? And so we've engaged at analyst level, help solve their problems, help solve some of the workforce issues, and like adoption's kind of been trickling up, and it's had a big impact in the organization.
Great, great. So, Dana was talking about her path into the field, and philosophy major, and I was also a philosophy major at first, but then I switched to criminology, which was way more appropriate for Dana. But what was your path? How did you come into this?
Sure. So my path is actually more software development, computer science, econ background, and started with a job, won't name the company, but working on Wall Street, working for an investment bank, and doing software development, building out trading tools. Part of that job had me working on the trading floor, and there were more expletives on the trading floor. A lot of them aimed at me, the technology guy, than I expected. It just wasn't the right culture fit. But what I was building these data-driven applications, and I love that. And the building tools to take advantage of the data, to leverage the data to make better decisions, something that really resonated for me. So I was like, okay, I need to do something different. I want to build out these data-driven tools, but the industry wasn't just a right fit for me. So 180, I was like, okay, let me quit my job. I'll move to California. It seems like a theme here, and just like I'll find work out there. And so joined a startup and was doing software development there, more around their database. And it was a small company, and the CEO, the founders would occasionally tap me on the shoulder and just say, hey, I have a question, right? We're making this change in the product. You know the database, you know the system, just can you answer this question? So I started answering questions, right? I started answering more questions, and I was like, okay, I can't actually do my job, guys. I keep answering your questions. And like, okay, let's start an analytics group, right? And so built a small team, and what we were doing was building out BI platforms for that company, answering questions for the executive team, for the different product teams, and kind of learned as much as I can in that small environment. And then I was thinking about from my career, it's like, all right, I need more exposure, right? I'm kind of new to the world of analytics. Where can I go to sort of to grow, learn from others, which I think is really important for any career. Is you're constantly learning in your role, and you're working with people that are challenging you. So I sought out organizations that are really data-driven. I sought out people that I recognize I can learn from. That was what I always looked for when I was interviewing. Was, is this person going to help me grow in my role? Can I learn from this person? What can I learn from this person? And so that has led me to a few different places, but each step I've been learning new things about data, about technology, about analytics and data science, and helping me get to where I am today. Great,
great. Terrence, I really appreciate you taking the time and coming out and talking to us and taking us through the journey at Turner. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Frank.
Cheers.